So what I often tell aspiring language learners is that get a plan, whatever that plan is. What should that language learning plan consist of, Dan?
So the most basic thing it should consist of is consistency, if that makes sense. So it needs to be every
Every
day.
day.
Every day, you need to be doing something with the language. Even if it's just 15 minutes, even if it's just 10 minutes, every day you need to be exposed to the language. You need to be using it for some sort of concrete purpose. Now, that can look like using a language app. If you're a little bit more advanced, it can look like listening to the news or reading the news in that language. Not just news,
Hmm.
actually, could be anything that you're interested in, but reading or listening in the language every day. So it just depends on your personal goals, your personal style. But I would say any plan that you put together has to include daily interaction with the language, a daily practice with the language. For beginners, there's a lot of language apps out there that can help you. I would say what you really want to look for in whatever program you choose to put together for yourself, the beginning of it has to be forgiving. So you have to
That,
be willing to
yeah.
make mistakes. You have to be willing to do some things that are repetitive.
Hmm.
Right? Exercises that are repetitive help you build what's called automaticity so that the language comes to you quickly. Because part of communication is not just crafting a good message, let's say, in the sense of understandable, but the message has to be delivered quickly. You can't really communicate if you're talking or write. Well, writing is a little bit different. If you're talking very slowly, that can actually impede communication. So you want to make sure, I would say fast and with mistakes is better than slow and
So
perfect.
I noticed on
So,
social media, there are a lot of language programs and language apps that make this assertion that
mhm.
stop memorizing language. Okay, so imagine a beginner learner saying, okay, if I can't memorize language, how do I get from here to the ability to communicate without that? Can you share your ideas on that?
Sure. So a good language program, a good language app, for example, or a good teaching program will actually have you
Hmm.
memorizing little chunks of the language first so that you can string those
Yeah.
chunks together quickly. But there should be a transition point where those chunks
Mhm.
then are analyzed. So if you notice that whatever you're using is just having you memorize chunks of language without you really ever delving into what those chunks are, that's probably not the best thing for even learning
Mhm.
to get by in the language. So I would say you want to look for that transition point where the chunks then begin to be
I see.
analyzed.
Okay, great.
So there is, but you have to memorize vocabulary. I don't know any
There's
other
no
way
other way
around
around
it.
it. Yeah.
Even if you're
And when you think
language.
about studying vocabulary, do you think the flashcard
Mhm.
technique is better or learning vocabulary generally in some kind of relatable context?
So the best way to learn vocabulary is by reading. So as soon as you are able to try your hand at reading text in the language, the best way to learn vocabulary is by seeing vocabulary used in context, and you need to see it at least 8 to 12 times in context before you integrate that word into your vocabulary. So the more you read, even if it's just at the beginning, advertisements or infographics or simple social media posts, seeing the word in context can
Mhm.
really help. For most of the commonly taught languages, so those being like French, Spanish, German, and also I believe they're branching out into some of the less commonly taught languages, but it's Lingui,
Mhm.
Linguee. If you Google that, it'll come up. And it's not AI powered, or maybe it is now, but what it does is you put a phrase in English and it'll show you that phrase in context. So let's say you want to learn how to say pass a
Okay.
test, right?
Yeah.
I passed the test, right? Because pass
Hmm.
can have a lot of different meanings, right? So when you're thinking of how to use a word, you want to definitely put it in a little bit of a context. So how do we say pass a test in French? If you go to Lingui and write pass a test, it'll show you how that's rendered. It'll have the English version on the left and the French version on the right. And what it does is it searches through texts
Hmm.
that have been translated professionally, and it gives you the options for the word or phrase that you're looking for. So that's a really good way to see words in context. So I think of the resources that are out there, Lingui is very strong.
Great.
It shows you phrases like that in context so that you can see how the whole idea is rendered. And I think that's an important thing to think about with vocabulary. You're not doing just words, you're trying to render entire ideas.
And so just to conclude, the whole idea of a language learning plan is set goals that are achievable in the short term, some kind of timeline, and then choosing wisely the materials and the resources that you use with a combination of some authentic resources that are from the host nation where they speak the target language.
But really, it doesn't matter what materials you use. It matters how much time you're spending. That's why I said whatever you do, it has to be every day. So find something you like and do it every day. And just make sure, like you said, in a way, but I'll put it perhaps a little bit more simply, is make sure that you are doing some practice where you are doing automaticity. So you're doing repetitive kinds of activities. And then also make sure that you are attaching meaning to the forms, to the words and the grammar that you're using.
Great.
So you have to have some of both.